a.m. in Central African Time. Thank you very much for tuning in via channelafrica.co.za. Last week, we'll have you know that Mauritius made history by criminalising marital rape. This is a move widely welcomed as a major step in being able to tackle gender-based violence. The decision aligns with growing commitments across the African continent, including under the African Union's Maputo Protocol and the recently adopted Convention on Ending Violence Against Women and Girls. Let's unpack what this legal reform means for survivors and how marital rape is treated across Africa and why many countries have yet to make it a crime. Jean-Paul Murunga joins me in his capacity as Associate Director at End Gender-Based Violence at Equality Now for the Africa region. Jean-Paul, a pleasure to have you on Channel Africa. Thanks for the time.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Let's start by establishing what does marital rape mean in practical terms?
Well, in practical terms, it is rape just like any other rape in the sense that having a sexual intercourse with someone without their consent, and in this case, sexual intercourse means penetration, however slight, and this penetration can be using the sexual organs, that is the penis, or using any other body parts, or in certain cases, using an object. So if you do all those sexual acts without the consent or the agreement of the person you're doing this act with, then that amounts to rape. Now, marital in the context of marriage, if you do it in the context of that intimate relationship of marriage, then it is still rape.
Right. Why has it taken us so long as the various countries and constituencies on the continent to recognize marital rape as a crime?
Well, there are very many reasons, but the few that we can share given the time is that one, a lot of the countries we have in Africa have legislations that were inherited from the colonial countries. So, for instance, in East Africa, we have a lot of laws that were inherited from England, and then you have other laws that were inherited from the French. In West Africa, some from German laws. So then these laws at that time did not recognize the rights of women or rights of wives as individuals. So you remember, for example, women could not even own property in their own name. And in certain cases, under English law, it is until if you are married, then you got some legal standing. So those laws got entrenched with beliefs and of course, other practices that meant that women were represented or women would be owned by men. So that meant that if you get married, then you have sex in perpetuity in the sense that the woman has no choice. She belongs to the man. So then these laws have been there for a while. We have countries that have tried to change them so that women can regain their individuality, their dignity, their security of the person. So then we have countries like Kenya that have laws which are modern, like 2006. You have South Africa, which, according to the research that I did in 2024, actually has one of the best laws against sexual offenses or sexual violence in the continent. So then the colonial system of laws that did not recognize the woman's individuality and dignity are now being replaced progressively. But of course, this depends on a country's progress from changing the constitution to changing the individual laws, and then countries move at different paces. So we have countries that have already overhauled those laws, like South Africa, Kenya, a number of countries in the southern part of Africa, Zambia, have done that, while other countries still retain the colonial legal systems. For example, unrecent countries like South Sudan, which basically has laws that are also intertwined with culture, and in the cultural settings, woman has a smaller space. The space of a woman is, for instance, in the family, in the kitchen, in the home, taking care of children. So there's that traditional sort of settings, and that is replicated in the law. So then you have laws that say that once you are married, you have no choice. When your husband says let's have sex, he is the one to decide. But we are hoping that with the standards that have been set at the continental level, the African Union level, the UN level, this will be able to inform some of these laws so that they progressively reform to be able to protect the rights of women in all contexts, private and public.
Right. I think it is such a significant development on the continent, especially as you mentioned the fact that there are several other structures that are, supporting this notion. The African Union's Maputo Protocol and the recently adopted Convention on Ending Violence Against Women and Girls. How do we then move into, this being something that is inspired by Mauritius into actual action by the various governments to make sure that it is implemented into their legal systems?
Yes, we laud the African Union and we laud governments like the Mauritius government that are moving progressively to ensure there's full protection of women in both private and public spaces. And our realization from the work that we've been doing for over 30 years now is that law alone, passing the law alone does not amount to protection or offering comprehensive protection for the women, for their rights to be realized, for them to enjoy their choices. There's a lot of other infrastructure that comes with that. For example, if you look at South Africa, there's a whole system of specialized courts to address cases of violence or gender-based violence. So then there's a system of specialized personnel trained, but also mechanism that is equipped, courts that are equipped with confidentiality issues, equipped with safety so that there is no retaliation against any woman who reports violations. So then that also goes hand in hand with training. Remember, these laws are passed while already you have officers in the field. So then these officers need to be trained on these new laws, on new approaches in terms of when we say consent. What do we mean? It must be free, it must be of free will, and this consent must be continuous so that, for example, if the two persons are in the process of having sex, then one says, no, I think I'm not comfortable with this, then it should be taken as a no that the other person should stop. So then interpreting that consent in the modern sense, in that so that you offer the full available protection within the law. Other things to be offered is, for example, the psychosocial counseling. Remember, this is a really personal crime. Rape touches the dignity, the security of the person at a very deep personal level. So then despite getting justice, sometimes you just need to heal as well. So a lot of medical support, psychosocial counseling support to be provided for survivors. Despite the fact that you already have a good law that recognizes consent, you need to have all these other support systems to ensure that that law is fully implemented in what we call the do no harm approach. Because sometimes if you implement the law in a bad way, the survivors will not come back. They will feel violated further. Maybe they're being asked questions that are not being treated confidentially, their testimonies are not believed, the system is not offering protection, so that the survivor keeps on meeting with the perpetrator or with the person accused, and that really hurts the survivors more because it takes them back to the violation. So having all these systems to support the law, and we've seen countries that have those systems, South Africa one, Zambia, Kenya, Rwanda has also a very robust system that supports the survivors as they access justice. Beyond the jailing of the perpetrator, there are other mechanisms to support the survivor to regain her life, because rape is really a very personal and violative crime. Yeah.
You mentioned something incredibly critical in this conversation, that changing the legalities and the law around this is simply not enough. So let's look at the role of community leaders then in this context, Jean-Paul. Community leaders, faith-based leaders, if we can call them that, and families. What role do they play in us being able to change and shape the attitudes towards what is happening in marriages and marital rape, to be specific?
Yes, these leaders indeed have a very strong position in the society. They are also called, quote unquote, gatekeepers, in the sense that they keep the social norms of the community. Whatever is being done, sometimes they have even stronger voice than the political system, and sometimes they also influence the political system. So they have a critical role to ensure that the vulnerable persons in the society, especially women, girls, children, because these are persons who sometimes do not have voice, or their voices do not reach the platforms where they can claim and protect their rights. So they should ensure that the society protects this vulnerable person and ensure that they are not violated, and if they are violated, then there's a recourse in terms of the legal process. We also have countries that use informal, traditional processes to vindicate these cases, but we found that those systems have always not been adequate, because they've always prioritized community harmony as opposed to the rights of the survivors. But one key critical component that the community leaders, religious leaders, thought leaders, opinion leaders can play is that they can influence the community in terms of how the community thinking, the thinking process, that what do we deem to be wrong and what do we deem to be right. So if we deem sexual violence or rape or gender-based violence or violence in general to be a bad thing, then definitely these opinion leaders, when they speak about that, they're able to influence the younger generation and even their own peers to see and appreciate that actually rape is a bad thing, sexual violence is a bad thing, gender-based violence is a bad thing. And we've seen the African Union coming together to bring these opinion leaders under the cultural leaders of Africa, Kotla framework platform, for them to think through these things, because for a long time they've been seen to, quote unquote, support some of the harmful practices. So for example, if you talk about things like wife inheritance, child marriage, female genital mutilation, things that are within the continuum of gender-based violence, and of course gender-based violence includes those plus sexual violence, that is rape, sexual assault, and all that. So for them to understand the issue around why this violence is so bad, why is it that in the society we've had male dominating and female being the inferior, and therefore female being violated. So when they understand that, and they're also shown the consequences, both health consequences, economic consequences, of this violence against the women or against the girl or against the vulnerable persons, they're able to appreciate the gravity of the act, and therefore they're able to influence. And when they speak on these platforms like the radios, the televisions, or their own public meetings, they're able to condemn. So when they condemn this act, then the community starts to change their thought, and they're able to hold other members accountable who perpetrate this. Because remember, accountability is not just by the government. Accountability is also by the community itself, because when the act happens in the community, it's the community that reports. It could be the victim that reports, or the survivor, or their parents, or their guardians, or their friends. So unless the friends trust and believe that actually you can report a case and it will be taken through, and that is because they know that even the community leaders in that community do not condone, they do not support this act, then they're able to confidently report. But if they know that the community leaders support the violations, then basically, it is a social kind of group that don't want to do what other people are consider that is normal, normalizing or socializing it. So then it prevents reporting, it leads to stigma, and therefore survivor doesn't have people who support them. But if this community leaders embrace the fact that sexual violence, rape is wrong, then the survivor is able to be provided with the necessary support at the community level, even before the survivor goes to the police and the legal system. There's already a network of support, a network that reports any suspected rapist, and that helps to ensure that basically the community is safer for everyone.
All right, very, very important. Jean-Paul Murunga, Associate Director at End Gender-Based Violence, I beg your pardon, at Equality Now. And of course, he is in charge of the Africa region. We continue conversations after this break.
Africa World Hour with Mosito.
Video circulating on social media has drawn attention to rising tensions between citizens of Mozambique and South Africa. Solomon Mondlane, a Mozambican political figure, journalist, and a member of the National Alliance for Free and Autonomous Mozambique, Anamola. What was your reaction when you first saw the video from Ponta do Oro?
To say this, when we are dealing with this issue, we need to be sober-minded. We need to understand that the level of hate amongst the people from the two nations being South Africa and Mozambique and other African countries is at a level which we need to understand whatever reactions that comes from them. I was a bit disturbed, though I had to be calm and understand the background of such acts, and to also say to myself, we are still going to experience this.
Africa World Hour with Mpositole. Catch it on the Channel Africa app, SABC Plus, and on channelafrica.co.za. Weekdays from 9 till 10 p.m. Central African Time. Look closer. Listen deeper. This is The Channel with Mosito on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
24 minutes into 11 a.m., having a conversation with Jean-Paul Murunga of the End Gender-Based Violence at Equality Now. He is Associate Director there. And we're looking at the fact that Mauritius has made history by criminalizing marital rape, and what this legal reform means not only for Mauritius, but how it can be a pragmatic example for other African countries to follow, at least those that are not practicing this as law. Jean-Paul, let's look at, what this perhaps, the importance of the regional agreements. I want us to talk and get an understanding on these agreements, the Maputo Protocol, as we'd mentioned earlier. How do they encourage countries to update their laws at this time?
Thank you, thank you. The regional agreements are extremely important because these regional agreements, they manifest the consensus in terms of our behaviors and our agreements at a regional level. And then at that regional level, you're able to take advantage of the good, the best example in terms of what the golden standard should be, and that is able to inspire the local or the domestic or national level standard. And these agreements, remember, they are the agreements that are negotiated over a very long period of time. For example, if you look at the Maputo Protocol, it took over 3 to 5 years for it to be in place, for countries to agree on the different provisions and articles that they think that this is actually the best or the most appropriate standard for Africa, understanding the context of Africa in terms of the conflicts that we have, the pandemics, our cultural beliefs and systems, and therefore those agreements at that level then give us an inspiration as a nation now to aspire to that. So then countries can come in to pick provisions of that agreement and integrate in their national laws. In certain cases, the countries pick the whole agreement and make it their own national law, of course, with minimal changes here and there to reflect their context. Then that is what gets implemented. So these agreements are really critical because they reflect our joint or our common understanding of our behavior, especially when you talk about now violence against women or violence against women and girls or gender-based violence. That informs what is to be implemented at the national level. So we have countries that will take it wholesomely. We have countries that will take it to their parliament, debate it, remove some provisions, some reservations, what we call reservations, basically saying that we are bound by Article 1 up to 10, but Article 11, we will still think about it because there are other beliefs or religious practices that we have that this conflicts with, and therefore we need more time to reflect around this. So we have that, and in the Maputo Protocol, we have a lot of reservations under Article 14, the sexual reproductive health rights, so providing women with a choice when and how to have children and at what intervals and how many. So then there are a lot of countries that have made reservations around that. But on the issue of violence against women, which comes from around Article 6 on child marriage, on discrimination, violence being a form of discrimination against women and girls, those ones no country really puts reservations because it is common. It is known now. Research has shown that violence is bad. It causes personal harm. It harms the economy. It harms the peace. When there's violence, of course, there's no peace in that particular relationship. It could be a marriage or just gender relationship between men and women in a community. So then these regional standards, for us as Africa, for a long time we were guided by the UN standard, but I'm happy now the African Union has taken this mantle from 2003 when they passed the Maputo Protocol, because for a long time issues to do with violence against women, we were guided by the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, which is a UN document. But now we have an Africa document, which I believe a lot of countries, now we have actually 46 countries out of 55 have ratified it, basically saying that we agree to be bound by this. So you can imagine it has really gained acceptance, and we are pushing towards having it universally ratified by all African countries, because it basically represents what we want for what we call the Africa we want 2063, or the Africa Agenda for Children 2040, that this is the kind of Africa we want, where there's no violence against anyone, against women, against boys, against girls, and if there is violence, then there is mechanism for accountability through the court system. So yes, these agreements are extremely important, and they help us to find our way through the society.
Right, right. And lastly, I think it's important for us to perhaps address, the men and the boys as part of this conversation, especially when we look at how we've normalized in many societies very harmful gender norms, and as you rightfully put it in the first segment, Jean-Paul, we need to, of course, look at how we can make it easier for survivors to seek justice. So, just in a minute, can you share with us how we can involve boys and men in these conversations and really shape new gender norms going forward?
Yes, at Equality now we have an approach, we are calling it the multi-sectoral approach, meaning that it is an approach that brings everybody on board. So then under this approach, you can actually have the Minister of Education within that approach taking the responsibility to educate pupils, students as they grow, because a lot of socializations happen in the school context because children spend a lot of time in schools. So there's a bit of that. And then we have the other bit of positive parenting, which some of our partners are doing, where now we are talking with parents in terms of how do they bring up their children to appreciate that boys and girls are equal in the sense that they're equal in dignity, they're equal in rights, they're equal in value as human beings. Because a lot of this conflict, for example, if you look at the statistics on gender-based violence in Africa, general intimate partner is the leading form of violence. Then you come to other violence like sexual assault in terms of defilement and rape. So that intimate partner violence basically means there's a power fight in the relationships, and the socialization has been that the male dominate the relationship, and therefore the way of solving the problem in the relationship is through fights, through violence, and that's why you hear all these cases of femicides. So then in this multi-sectoral approach, the Ministry of Education will take care of that: education, public awareness, socializing the children in schools in a positive masculinity aspect, and then you have the finance bringing the money to support the programs that are devised to support public awareness and even accountability. Then we have the Minister of Gender doing the coordination, making sure that all this work feeds into each other, so there is no duplication, there's no wastage of resources. So then that whole society or whole community approach really helps to ensure that even men and boys are included in the programming, so that the social norms are changed. If there's any violation, the accountability can be achieved, but also the women and girls feel safe in the context where they are men and boys, knowing that these men and boys appreciate the fact that we are equal in dignity, we are equal in right, and nobody should be discriminated or violated. Yeah.
Absolutely. Jean-Paul Murunga, thank you very much for your insight. Associate Director at End Gender-Based Violence at Equality Now for the Africa region. Of course, it is 11:31. Figilele Ngwati standing by with the latest sports.
Sports.